Okay, let's unpack this. Think about the sheer power locked away in medical data. You have patient scans, health records, genomic info is basically the fuel for AI models that could completely change how we find cancer, how we predict treatment success, maybe even make diagnoses way more accurate.
Oh, absolutely. The potential is just, well, staggering, isn't it? Machine learning models, they really thrive on huge, diverse data sets. The more information they can chew on, the better they get at spotting those tiny, tiny patterns. Patterns that might be totally invisible to us or even to standard analysis.
Exactly. But here's the rub, right?
Mm.
This data is incredibly private. I mean, protecting patient confidentiality isn't just ticking a box for regulations, it's fundamental. So the question is, how do you unlock the power of all that data for research without compromising privacy one bit? How do we get the collective insight without the individual risk?
Yeah, that's really the core challenge for AI in healthcare today. I mean, historically, the approach might have been to just pool everything together in one big central database, like a data lake.
Right. Sounds simple enough.
Well, simple, but it's a privacy minefield, frankly. It's
Yeah.
vulnerable to breaches, and you immediately run into massive legal and regulatory walls. Things like GDPR in Europe or HIPAA in the US, they make moving sensitive health data very, very difficult.
Makes sense. You're physically shifting and storing identifiable, really sensitive stuff all in one basket.
Yeah.
And there's another problem too, isn't there? Even if you could somehow centralize it all securely, data from just one hospital, say, it's often kind of limited. It reflects only their patients, their equipment, maybe their specific ways of doing things.
Precisely. A model trained just on data from, I don't know, a hospital in London might not work nearly as well using data from a clinic in Tokyo. The populations are different, maybe the scanners are calibrated differently. Tiny variations matter, so this really hurts the model's generalizability.
Its ability to work reliably elsewhere.
Exactly, so you're kind of stuck, aren't you? Single-center data isn't big or diverse enough, but centralizing data from lots of places hits that privacy and legal wall. You need the combined power, but the data itself has to stay put.
And that sounds like a perfect entry point for federated learning, or FL. That's what it's designed to tackle, right?
That's precisely the problem FL aims to solve, yes.
Okay, so let's really dig into this. What is federated learning exactly? How does it manage to bridge that gap?
Okay, so at its heart, FL is a different way of thinking about machine learning. It's decentralized. It lets lots of different institutions, hospitals, clinics, research labs work together to train one shared AI model without any of them ever having to actually share their raw patient data.
Wait, the data never leaves their control. It stays local.
Stays local, securely within each institution's own systems behind their firewalls.
That sounds almost like magic. How can the model learn from data it doesn't actually see directly?
Yeah, it's pretty clever. Think of it like this. There's a central coordinator, maybe a server, but crucially, it never sees the raw data either. It just manages the process.
The central server sends out an initial version of the AI model to all the participating hospitals or clinics.
Okay, like a template model.
Sort of, yeah. An untrained or partially trained model. Step 2. Each hospital then takes that model and trains it locally using only its own private patient data. So the model learns from their specific patients right there on their own premises.
All right, learning happens locally. Then what?
Then, and this is the key bit, instead of sending their sensitive data back to the central server, they only send back the changes or updates made to the model during that local training. These updates are basically mathematical summaries of what the model learned. Think of them like adjustments to the model settings or weights.
So not the data itself, just
Oh, yeah.
the lessons learned from the data.
Exactly. Step 4. The central server gathers up all these mathematical updates from all the participating institutions. It then intelligently combines them, maybe by averaging them out. That's a common way to create a new, improved global version of the model.
Ah, okay. So it aggregates the learning from everyone.
Precisely. Step 5. This improved global model is then sent back out to all the institutions. And step 6. The whole cycle repeats. Local training, sending updates back, central aggregation, sending the improved model out again, round after round.
And each round, the global model gets smarter, learning from the collective wisdom of all the data, but without that data ever leaving home.
That's the core idea. The institutions keep full control and privacy over their data, meeting all those tricky regulatory and ethical needs. But they still get the benefit of a model trained on a much larger, much more diverse data set than any single one of them could ever manage alone.
That really is fascinating. It sidesteps the whole centralization problem while still harnessing the power of distributed data.
Exactly. It unlocks access to the kind of scale and diversity that's absolutely critical for pushing AI forward, especially in complex areas like precision medicine, where those privacy barriers have been a major roadblock.
And oncology, cancer research must be a prime example of where this is desperately needed.
Oh, absolutely. Cancer data diagnoses, treatment details, patient outcomes, genetic markers. I mean, it's about as sensitive as personal health information gets. Patients, quite rightly, need absolute assurance about its privacy.
And yet, being able to analyze huge, diverse sets of exactly that kind of data collaboratively and quickly could be transformative. It could drastically improve how we understand cancer, lead to much better diagnostic tools, and ultimately really improve outcomes for patients. You need to see patterns across thousands, maybe millions of cases.
Right, and AFL offers a way to do that. It provides a mechanism to tap into those essential large, diverse data sets needed to refine clinical decisions, especially as we try to move towards more personalized cancer treatments, tailoring therapy based on really complex data profiles. That's just incredibly difficult, if not impossible, with the old centralized methods because of those non-negotiable privacy and regulatory hurdles.
Okay, that really sets the scene perfectly for why FL is such a big deal in this area. Now let's pivot to the specific source for our deep dive today. This systematic review, done in partnership with Seoul National University Bundang Hospital. It focused specifically on FL and breast, lung, and prostate cancer research, looking at the period between 2020 and 2023. What did they find? Was this a busy area of research?
Well, the review showed a really clear and frankly rapid acceleration of interest. Get this.
Oh.
They found zero relevant papers on FL in these specific cancers published in 2020.
Zero. None at all.
Zero. Then, in 2021, there were 4 papers. In 2022, it jumped to 8. And in 2023, there were 13 papers.
Wow. Okay, that's not just growth. That's
Yeah.
that's an explosion of activity in just 3 years. That definitely tells you something significant is happening.
It's a very strong signal, yeah. Researchers are clearly seeing the potential here and are actively jumping in. Now, the review authors were quite careful. They wanted to assess how rigorous these studies were. So they used 2 main criteria. First, did the study actually compare its FLR approach against a traditional centralized machine learning model using the exact same data?
Okay, a direct head-to-head comparison.
And second, in that comparison, did the FL method perform better than, or at least as well as, the centralized baseline?
So not just showing, hey, we did FL, but proving it actually stacked up well against the standard way of doing things on the same playing field.
Precisely. They wanted to see if FL was truly effective, not just, technically possible. And out of the 25 papers they looked at in total, 18 met both of those rigorous criteria.
18 out of 25. That's a pretty solid majority doing that important comparison work.
It is. And then comes the really interesting part, the million-dollar question. How did FL actually perform in those rigorous head-to-head tests?
Yeah, what was the result?
Well, this is where it gets really compelling. Among those 18 rigorous studies, the FL methods actually outperformed the centralized models in 15 cases.
15 out of 18 outperformed.
Outperformed. And in the remaining 3 studies, the FL methods showed comparable results, meaning they were just as good as the centralized approach.
Okay, hang on, let that sink in. In rigorous direct comparisons, FL was never worse, and in the vast majority of cases, 15 out of 18, it was actually better than the standard centralized method. That's huge. It goes way beyond just being a privacy solution. It suggests FL might actually lead to better models because it can leverage that distributed diversity more effectively.
It's a massive finding, yes. It really validates the core idea. Collaborative learning across different distributed data sets can yield superior results, not just equivalent ones.
So what were the main things these studies were trying to achieve by using FL? What were their goals?
The review identified a few primary scopes, as they called them. The most common goal, found in 14 papers, was improving the ML model's generalizability, making sure it works well on new, unseen data from different places. Right behind that, in 13 papers, was improving the actual prediction accuracy of the model.
Better performance, basically.
Right. And data privacy itself was also explicitly mentioned as a key focus in 8 papers, although, as we've said, privacy protection is kind of inherent to the FFL approach itself. A few studies, 3 of them, also explored using FL for improving the understanding of the disease itself.
Okay, so make models work better everywhere. Make them more accurate, protect data, and maybe even understand cancer better. Sounds like the right priorities given the initial problem we discussed.
Makes perfect sense, yes. In terms of the specific cancers they looked at, among those rigorous papers, breast cancer and lung cancer were the most common focus, with 8 studies each. But they also found studies looking at prostate cancer, and even some tackling multiple cancer types and multiple diseases together.
And what kind of actual tasks were these FL models doing, clinically speaking?
Well, the technical tasks boiled down mainly to classification, like telling cancerous tissue apart from healthy tissue. That was in 14 papers. Then there was segmentation, basically drawing outlines around tumors or affected regions. That was 5 papers. And detection, just identifying if a suspicious lesion is present or not, also 5 papers.
And the clinical applications?
Things like identifying tumors, that was 8 papers. Differentiating between different types or subtypes of cancer, 7 papers. And assessing the severity or stage of the disease, 4 papers. So really core diagnostic and assessment tasks.
I assume they were using all sorts of different data types, imaging, patient records.
Oh yeah, a real mix. Lots of medical imaging, MRI, CT scans, X-rays, whole slide images, which are like digital microscope slides. Also digital mammography, PCC
Right.
scans. But also structured data like electronic health records, other clinical notes, and even genomics data in some cases.
A broad range. And the models themselves.
Also diverse. Everything from huge pre-trained models that have learned from vast amounts of general data down to more specialized neural networks like UNets and CNNs, which are common in imaging. They also use some classic machine learning algorithms and even things like Jan's generative adversarial networks. Classification tasks, maybe unsurprisingly, seem to use the widest variety of model types.
What about the scale? Were these studies using data from like hundreds of thousands of patients?
It really varied. The patient cohort sizes ranged quite dramatically. Some studies had fewer than 100 patients, while others had over 100,000. The actual volume of data, like the number of images or samples, also varied a lot.
Interesting. And was it mostly private hospital data or public data sets?
Actually, it was more common for studies to use publicly available data sets. There was 18 papers. Only 9 used exclusively private data, and 5 used a mix of both. Using public data can be helpful for comparing results and trying to set benchmarks, which is something we'll probably come back to as a challenge.
Right. You mentioned earlier something about implementation details being maybe underspecified. What did the review find there?
Yeah, this was flagged as a significant limitation in the review paper itself. They found a general lack of detail in how researchers reported the specifics of their FL setup. For instance, only 13 out of the 25 papers actually specified which FL method they used, and horizontal FL was the most common one mentioned in 11 of those.
Horizontal FL. What's that briefly?
That's typically when the different institutions have similar types of data, but for different patients. It's the most common setup. But yeah, even then, only 13 specified the method. Even fewer, just 5 papers mentioned the specific aggregation strategy they used, which is how the central server combines those model updates. Federated averaging was the most frequent one named there, in 4 papers.
So how they actually merge the learnings is often left out.
Often, yes. And maybe even more surprisingly, despite privacy being a huge selling point for MFL, only 5 papers explicitly reported which specific privacy-enhancing techniques they added on top, if any. Things like differential privacy or secure aggregation methods or homomorphic encryption.
Wow. So even in studies that showed really good, rigorous results, the actual recipe, the how-to, is frequently missing key ingredients. That feels like a pretty major obstacle for other people wanting to replicate the work or build on it.
It absolutely is. It's a real challenge for reproducibility and for comparing different approaches effectively. If you can't see the full blueprint, it's hard to build the same house, let alone improve it.
Okay, despite those reporting issues, let's talk about the impact shown in these studies. How do these findings, these positive results, translate into potential real-world benefits in cancer care?
Well, the impacts really line up with those main goals we saw researchers focusing on, primarily enhanced generalizability, improved prediction accuracy, and enabling more precise personalized medicine, all while maintaining that crucial data privacy.
Okay, let's break down enhanced generalizability first. What does that really mean in practice?
It means that because the FL models learn from data across multiple diverse institutions, different patient groups, maybe different scanner types or protocols, they become much better at understanding the underlying patterns of the disease, rather than just quirks of one specific hospital's data.
So they're less likely to be tripped up by variations they encounter in a new hospital.
Exactly. They become more robust, more reliable when deployed in the real world on data they haven't explicitly trained on before. The review highlighted some concrete examples, like one study by Agley and colleagues showed improved accuracy in classifying breast tumors, hitting nearly 96%. Another by Zhu et al. Got better results detecting and outlining lung nodules, importantly, even when the data across sites was quite different what they call non-IID data.
Non-IID, meaning not identically distributed, like different demographics or equipment.
Precisely. And that's key for real-world use. They achieved an 89% metric for detection and a 76% DICE score for segmentation. DICE is a common measure for how well the outlined area matches the true area. For prostate cancer, studies by Yan et al., Saran et al., and Ragopal et al. All showed significant boosts, things like 98.75% accuracy in classification, or an 89.5% DICE score for segmentation, or even boosting accuracy by roughly 10 to 15 percentage points compared to single-site training.
Okay, so that ability to generalize, which is absolutely vital for actually using these tools in different clinics, gets a clear thumbs up from FL. What about just raw predictive power, making more accurate calls?
Yeah, that diverse data helps here too. By seeing more examples, more variations, the models can learn more subtle and complex patterns associated with the disease. This often leads to more accurate predictions overall. The review pointed to rigorous studies showing improvements in predicting, for example, how breast cancer patients might respond to chemotherapy. A study by Ogier du Terrell reached an AUC of 66%, which measures classification performance.
Better predictions of treatment response. That's huge.
It is. Other studies showed higher accuracy in classifying breast cancer itself. Results like 95%, 94%, even 99% accuracy were reported in different papers. There were also gains in predicting patient survival outcomes, better accuracy in detecting and classifying lung cancer. One study hit almost 99.7% accuracy, and even in predicting if a tumor might come back after treatment, with another study getting over 90% accuracy.
So it really looks like FL isn't just a workaround for privacy. In many of these rigorous tests, it's genuinely making the models perform better at their core task.
That definitely seems to be the strong message coming out of this body of research. And this ties directly into that idea of advancing precision medicine. Because FL can handle integrating different types of data, maybe imaging from one place, clinical notes from another, genomics from a third, all without physically pooling it. It opens doors. 7 of the rigorous studies specifically combined multimodal data like this.
Bringing different data streams together.
Right. Which is exactly what you need for developing those more sophisticated, tailored diagnostic and treatment strategies for specific groups of patients, or maybe even down to the individual level.
And underpinning all of this, obviously, is the privacy aspect.
Absolutely, that's the foundation. While FL's structure inherently protects data by keeping it local, some studies, as mentioned, went a step further. They explicitly added layers like encryption during the update transmission, or secure multi-party computation to hide the updates even from the central server, or differential privacy to add statistical noise, making it even harder to infer anything about individuals. Studies by Peta and Kapu and Field et al. Were noted for focusing explicitly on these advanced privacy techniques.
Was there any mention of efficiency? Like, does FL train faster?
There was one study that noted reduced training time compared to doing everything centrally. Which kind of makes sense intuitively, right? You're distributing the computational work across many machines.
Parallel processing, essentially.
Sort of, yeah. But the review noted this wasn't consistently evaluated or reported across all the papers. And you have to factor in the communication time. Sending models and updates back and forth can take time, especially with many participants or large models. So while there's potential for efficiency gains, it wasn't as clearly demonstrated or quantified in this review compared to the improvements in performance and generalizability.
Okay, so a lot of really positive impact and potential being demonstrated, but like any developing technology, it's not perfect yet. What were the main limitations or challenges that the review authors pointed out? What are the hurdles still in the way?
Yeah, the review was pretty clear about the obstacles still needing attention. Probably the biggest one, as we discussed, is that lack of standardization and the often poor reporting of the implementation details. Not specifying the exact FL algorithm, the aggregation method, the privacy techniques used.
That reproducibility problem again.
Exactly. It makes it really tough for other researchers to verify the results, to compare different approaches fairly, or to build confidently on previous work. The fact that only 8 out of the 18 rigorous papers even made their code available tells you something.
Yeah, that's a barrier. What else?
Another challenge relates to the data itself. Even in some of the rigorous studies, the datasets used sometimes had limited patient diversity. Maybe the participating hospitals were geographically close or had similar patient demographics. This could potentially limit how well the final model generalizes to truly different populations and increases the risk of embedding biases.
And you mentioned earlier that not all studies even did the basic comparison.
Right. 7 of the papers reviewed didn't meet those baseline criteria of comparing FL against a centralized model on the same data. So while they might have reported interesting FL results, it's hard to know how truly effective their approach was relative to the standard method, or if it introduced any unexpected trade-offs.
Lack of a benchmark.
Essentially, yes. And related to that, there's just a lot of variety, heterogeneity in the specific machine learning models people are using and the specific FL techniques they're applying, even for very similar clinical tasks. This makes it really difficult to establish clear best practices or figure out which approaches are most robust and scalable.
And comparing results becomes harder if everyone's using different yardsticks.
Definitely. The lack of consistent evaluation metrics across studies makes direct apples-to-apples comparisons tricky. And while using public datasets helps a bit, the review noted the absence of widely accepted, standardized benchmark datasets specifically designed for evaluating FL in oncology. Having those would make comparing different FL methods much more reliable and unbiased.
So big needs around transparency, standardization, benchmarks, any other major challenges?
Well, there are also the practical sort of engineering challenges. Things like the communication overhead, all that back and forth between the server and the clients can be significant. And managing potentially very different devices or systems at each participating site, plus implementing those sophisticated privacy techniques correctly, it all adds complexity and can sometimes offset those potential training time savings we talked about. It's not always trivial to deploy in the real world.
Okay, so definitely still some work to do to make FL a smooth, routine tool. Given all these findings, the promise and the challenges, what did the review authors suggest as the key future directions? Where should researchers focus their efforts next?
They laid out several important paths forward. Number one, echoing the limitation, was a strong call for increased transparency. Researchers need to provide open access to their code and much more detailed documentation about their methods.
Basically, show your work, make it reproducible.
Exactly. More open science principles. They also recommended making better use of public data sets to help establish those necessary benchmark frameworks so we can compare different FL approaches more fairly and consistently.
Get everyone on the same page for testing.
Right. And critically, they highlighted a need for more research into advanced aggregation methods. That's the step where the central server combines the updates. They mentioned specific techniques. Researchers are exploring names like FedProx, FedNova, FedEin, FedArd, the FedOpt framework. These are all designed to be smarter about combining updates, especially when dealing with that messy, real-world data heterogeneity, or situations where local models start to drift apart, or ensuring the final model is fair and works well for patients at all the participating sites, not just the average.
So making that central aggregation step more robust and adaptable to real-world complexities seems key.
Hugely important, yes. They also suggested looking more into federated transfer learning. The idea here is you take one of those huge models that's already been pre-trained on massive amounts of general data, and then you use federated learning to fine-tune it specifically for the cancer task using the distributed private data.
So leveraging the power of giant models, but tailoring them privately.
Kind of like getting the best of both worlds. And related to that, the final big direction was exploring how to best integrate the latest generation of very large foundation models, the kind of AI showing amazing results across language and vision within federated learning systems for oncology. The challenge there is how to harness their power while strictly maintaining privacy and dealing with the unavoidable variations in real clinical data.
So really pushing the envelope by combining the cutting edge of AI model development with the privacy and collaborative strengths of FL. Sounds like where the field needs to go.
It certainly represents a major exciting frontier for this research.
Okay, so let's zoom back out then. Taking stock of our deep dive into this systematic review, the picture that really comes through is one of, well, immense promise, wouldn't you say? Federated learning isn't just some theory anymore. It's actively being used, and it's delivering some really impressive, tangible results in vital areas like breast, lung, and prostate cancer research.
Absolutely. It's clearly demonstrating its ability to boost the performance and the generalizability of machine learning models. It achieves this by enabling learning from diverse, scattered data sets in a way that was previously impossible, while, and this is crucial, tackling that fundamental problem of protecting extremely sensitive patient data. Centralized methods just struggle to do that effectively at scale.
And for you, our listener, hopefully you now have a much clearer picture of how this technology actually works, where it's already being applied successfully, and the kind of specific validated results researchers are seeing, like those significant jumps in accuracy and better performance on realistic, varied data. You've gotten the key insights without needing to wade through all those dense academic papers yourself.
Yeah, it's technology that's really trying to square that circle between getting the most utility out of our data while upholding the highest standards of privacy. It's pushing the boundaries of what's possible in medical AI.
So here's a final thought to leave you with, something to mull over based on everything we've talked about. We've seen the clear advantages FL offers, both in model performance and in privacy protection, but we've also seen the real challenges that remain, things like standardizing methods, ensuring studies can be reproduced, making sure models are fair and unbiased across different patient groups. So the question is, how quickly do you think we'll see AI tools powered by federated learning move out of the research phase and become a standard part of everyday cancer diagnosis and treatment planning? And maybe thinking more personally, what would you need to feel confident? What level of evidence or transparency would you want to see before placing your full trust in a medical insight or decision that was influenced by an AI model trained in this collaborative, privacy preserving way? Definitely something to think about.